Today we're going to do contracts. We are getting to litigation, which is the heart of this course. We will do that the week after fall break. I don't do litigation until I have covered contracts and torts, because what you do in litigation is sue somebody for a broken contract, or you sue somebody for a slip and fall. So we will get through contracts and torts before we get to litigation. Contracts is easy. I talked about it in 101. If you have 101, offer, acceptance, consideration. Consideration is value. It can be money, it can be barter, it can be something that's exchanged. Now the key to contracts and the universal symbol for contracts is a K. And I often will use K without realizing it. You can use K in your answers too. That means a contract. Now, you have to have all three. And what happens in business is one of the three are often missing. All right, one of the three are often missing. An offer can be as simple as somebody having a sign outside their store. Nike shoes on sale, 20% off. That is an offer. If you go in that store and start picking up the shoes, that is an acceptance. Is it a contract? No, you hadn't paid anything. Until you have the consideration, it isn't a contract. So instead of doing something simple like that, let's say we're a $10 million business and we have ordered 100 trucks from Japan, and they get put on barges, get put on ships, and they come across the Pacific, and they come through the Panama Canal, and they come up the East Coast, and they come to the Charleston port, or the Baltimore port, or the Philadelphia port. Somewhere the boat docks. Now, the offer was, we're selling trucks, and the offer is we will buy 100 trucks. The acceptance is they sent the trucks. But the trucks get to Charleston, and they're still in the harbor because they hadn't paid for them. And they won't let them unload them from the boat until they've been paid for. Or, we'll buy 100 trucks. They send the money to China, and the trucks come to Charleston, get put on the back of 18-wheelers, and they get moved up I-26 to Newberry, and the trucks don't run. All right? The trucks don't run. The 13-year-olds in China that built the trucks didn't do a good job, and they won't crank, and so the trucks are worthless. So you don't accept them. You don't take title from the truck driver. And so it's not a contract. Have to have all three. Now, how does that work for you? Maybe you have formed a business. Maybe you've got management problems in that business, so you do a SWOT, a strategic plan, and maybe part of the management problem is you've got a contract that hadn't been signed or hadn't been paid for, and you have to pay it. Tell me. A contract that is not complete is void. A contract can be void on its face. If it hadn't taken effect, it's just a piece of paper or something on the internet. Right? That's if it's no good. If a contract is good, it's called a valid contract. A void contract. Learn to use proper language. Contracts are not broken. Contracts are breached. Contracts are breached. That's the proper term. I wouldn't count off for that because I don't count off for anything. But you don't get credit if you use broken, because I grade backwards. So use the proper term and your grade goes up. What does express mean in the law? I know I've covered that. If something is written, it is express. Express. A partnership that has a general partnership agreement or a signed Starbucks napkin, that's an express partnership because it's in writing. A partnership with a handshake is not expressed. Contracts can be, if it's not expressed and it's still a valid contract, it can be implied. And I use this example over and over and over again. The teenager across the street that cut my grass, I told him I'd pay him $20 if he cut my grass. He cut it. Next week I cut it again, I paid him $20. And next week he cut it again, I paid him $20. And for 5 years he cut my grass, all the way up into his 20s. And it got to where if the grass needed to be cut, he would just come cut it. And he may do that 2 or 3 times until I saw him. And then I would see him in the yard, and I'd say, how much I owe you? And he'd say $60, and I'd pay him. So what if he comes and knocks on my door and says, Mr. Leon, you owe me $40, and I need some money, can you pay me? And I say, what do I owe you money for? He said, well, I cut your grass twice. And I said, we don't have a contract. I said, there's no contract says I owe you $40. Now, would that be fair? No. Business law tries to be fair. So how do you make it fair? You have what's called an implied contract. The contracts that are written are expressed, but contracts that are implied are just like an implied partnership. Acts by the parties. The two parties exchange over a period of time such that a contract is implied that it exists. Another example that happens a lot, I know it happens a lot in the South, and it probably happens in really backward countries like Sweden or something. So, and that's where somebody inherits a general store, inherits a grocery store, inherits a gas station from their grandfather. And the grandfather started this gas station, and then the father ran it, and then the father passes it on, and the son is going to run the gas station. And the gas truck comes to put the gas into the ground, into the pumps, and he's charging 50 cents a gallon or whatever it is, $3 a gallon. And the son says, what are you doing? I don't have a contract with you. I can find gas cheaper. I can find gas at 48 cents a gallon or $2.98 a gallon. There's very little markup on gas. Gas stations make their money on the crackers and the brake shoes and oil changes. You don't make money on gas. Gas It doesn't matter if it's $5 a gallon or $1.50 a gallon, the gas station's only making a couple of pennies on that gas. They make the money on everything else, the coffee and the drinks. So the son says, I can save money and get the gas from somebody else. And the guy delivering the gas says, look, my grandfather was friends with your grandfather, and he started delivering gas in 1950, and we've delivered gas to this station for the last 40 years. Implied contract. Implied contract. Now, the son can say, well, I'm not buying it from you anymore, but the guy delivering the gas has a good lawsuit. Litigation on a broken, breached, implied contract. Torts, like contracts, are a big part of this class, big part of business law. You never hear about torts. You never see it on the movies. You never hear it about on TVs. But car wrecks are torts. Negligence is torts. Slipping on a banana peel in Food Lion is a tort. Eating a restaurant and getting sick because the food's bad is a tort. We're not to crime yet, but crime is an injury to society. Tort is an injury to a person or business, which is 90% of the lawsuits. Okay? People get, lawyers get rich on torts. Somebody has a car wreck and they're paralyzed and they win $10 million and the lawyer takes 40% of it, so he's getting $4 million. That's how what they call plaintiff lawyers make their money. Now, torts. And negligence has what I call an equation, a sentence, just like the basic business, revenue minus expenses. Torts is that we have a duty to the public or a person, and that person or that business suffers an injury. Duty has to be reasonable. The injury has to be foreseeable. Duty means you own something, or you're on the roads, or you are somewhere in the presence of other people, or you've got a duty to a business to clean the floors in that business. You may have a $1 million contract to clean a 40-story skyscraper to keep the floors clean. You're in there every night, you and your crew, and that's just a lot of money in that kind of maintenance division. But you don't do it well, and somebody slips and falls, that's a tort. Your brake light's out, it causes a wreck, somebody runs into the back of you, that's a tort. Okay, you're driving 100 miles an hour, that's a tort. There are a few things that are crimes and torts. If you're driving 100 miles an hour and you have a wreck, that can be a tort if you hurt somebody. It's also speeding. The most common example of a tort that is both a tort and a crime, meaning you can sue for it or you can get charged with a crime for it, would be assault and battery. Okay? Stand up. Now I can go to PRs, okay? And I can go to PRs and I can tell him, I'm going to beat your ass. All right? Now, that's assault. Assault is words. I stick my finger in his chest, that's battery. That's battery. So I can have assault and battery on him, or he can have it on me. And he can sue me. You know, he can sue me for $2,000 for being embarrassed in PRs. You know, maybe he loses his girlfriend because Professor Banks whipped his ass. Right? So, you know, so he sues me, and that's a tort. Okay? But he can also call the police. He can call the police, and they can arrest me for a crime of assault and battery. Okay? So, you know, assault and battery is a good example of it. Speeding is a good example of it. But there aren't many. There aren't many. Torts pretty much stand alone. Now, Food Lion has a responsibility, every grocery store has a responsibility to keep their floors clean. And with inflation and labor problems, maybe they don't have enough people working in there. Maybe the person working in the produce section was mad at their spouse that morning and came in late, and they're in a hurry, but whatever, they're in the produce section, and a rotten tomato falls onto the floor. And the produce manager says, "The heck with it, I don't have time to pick it up." And an old lady comes in and slips on the tomato, falls down, and busts her head. Now, is there a duty to the public from Food Lion? Is it reasonable to have the floors clean? That's a reasonable duty. Has that duty been breached? Yes. Has it resulted in an injury? Yes. Is an injury foreseeable? If you leave a rotten tomato in a grocery store, it is foreseeable that somebody's going to fall, and if they fall, it's foreseeable that they're going to get hurt. I mean, the floor is like the floor in here, right? And then one of the bag boys runs out to the parking lot, and the old lady's husband is sitting in his car and says, "Your wife just fell and busted her head. We've called 911, and the man in the parking lot has a heart attack and dies because he's so upset." Is that Food Lion's fault? It's a tragedy, but it's not foreseeable. Food Lion has no duty to people that are sitting in the car in their parking lot. The duty is to the people in the store, or maybe right out in front of the store. So, if I'm going to test you, on torts, and there's a hint in there about somebody's had an injury, or somebody's had a wreck, or somebody's fallen, and that's a hint, and you need to tell me this is a torts issue. And a torts means that they have the duty to the public and the business, and it has to be an injury, and it has to be foreseeable, and it has to be reasonable. If I test you, what am I going to test? Put yourself in my shoes. What's the easiest thing to test?
Know how to identify like that situation.
Exactly, identify what part of it.
If it's reasonable.
Exactly, thank you. This is what the test is. The reasonable and the foreseeable. An 8th grader can tell me that it's duty to injury. Okay, that's a multiple choice question. That's a fill in the blank question. What is a tort? A duty to a person that results in an injury. Okay, that's 8th grade. College is what isn't sure. What's at issue? What has to be decided? Okay, and what has to be decided is whether or not the duty was reasonable and whether or not the injury was foreseeable. And it can get very, very complicated. You know, it can get very complicated. they've got a fence around the nursing building out here where they're building. If somebody cuts through the rocks, cuts through to try to get to the education building over there, and they get hurt crossing that lot, is that a tort? It's been a while since I looked at it, but probably so, all right? It doesn't, I don't think that fence goes all the way around the whole 4 ways. I think it's just on the road side, so you can walk across it. If you walk across any construction, it's a tort, all right? You could step on a nail. You could fall in a hole. Okay? Yeah.
There's like some kind of sign or like precaution that you would see before, like people that were like caution, don't walk here.
Caution, don't walk that way, whatever. Okay, that's a great question.
Would that still be considered a tort?
Signs, don't walk this way. Caution, construction areas. All right, those. Now, when I was practicing law, I didn't represent corporations. I represented people. And representing people that got hurt or representing people that were charged with a crime, I can tell you those signs are not worth the paper they're printed on. Because the college or the construction company, there's no way in the world they can prove that you walked right by that sign or that you saw that sign. Maybe you were thinking about your next test. They have to put the sign up because without the sign, they definitely get sued. Without the sign, they get sued for millions. With the sign, they still get sued, but maybe you don't win as much. Okay, there's an argument. We'll talk about that when we get to litigation. Speaking of the nursing building, if you go down Evans Street to College Street, there's a big sign on, the picture of the nursing building. You know what I'm talking about? Does it look like a Jiffy Lube to anybody other than me? I mean, it looks like a Jiffy Lube. It's exactly what it looks like. They probably got a good deal by hiring the Jiffy Lube people to build it. All right. Any questions on contracts and torts? Okay, now we're moving fast. Wednesday we won't do anything too bad. It'll be on the video. Monday we start litigation. Litigation will take us a week and a half. All right, it is the heart of this course. All right, so we start lawsuits on Monday. And I'll see you Wednesday, or have a good break if I don't see you.